Hi, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast with a lot to talk about today, an absolute ton to talk about today as we dig in. I promised you this was going to be my revised 53-man roster. Who I think makes it, who doesn't. I'm going to talk about a couple of bubbles, and if there are bubbles, who I think the battle is with. Um, This is going to be an interesting podcast to say the least. And then obviously, once the 53 man is announced, I'll do a podcast going over that as well once we know all that's been done. So let's start at the quarterback position where I think the Raiders take three quarterbacks. Obviously, you're allowed to dress a third one out this year. And we know the order of that. It's Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer, and Aiden O'Connell. This today isn't depth chart. So we're going to get into that later on where everybody is in the depth chart. But I think that's the three quarterbacks. That's very evident. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time there. Then we get to running backs. And obviously, we include fullback in this group. And I think that they take five. Now, very quickly, just so you know, I'm not doing all this by memory. I got my sheets here, but I want to go back because I want to talk about how many Josh kept his first year at each position. So, for example, that in Josh's first year with the Raiders, they took two quarterbacks. And this year, because of the rule changes, they're going to keep three. Okay, so there you go. You got three guys there. Then again, at running back, I think that they keep five. Now, the five I think they keep, obviously, Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, and Brandon Bolden. Their first year here, they kept six. So I think that they go down one and keep five. Now, early, I think it was my first projection, I had them keeping four, Jakob, the fullback, and three running backs. And again, I've got them keeping Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Amir Abdullah, Brandon Bolden, and Jakob Johnson. Five. I had said four. And I believe if Zamir had shown more in the passing game, that he could have, they maybe would have considered moving on from a Bolden or an Amir. I have an opinion of which one, doesn't matter because it just be opinion, but that to me, but he has made progress, but not maybe necessarily where I think it was hoped to be. So I think they keep five. And if they had kept four, I think it would have allowed him to keep an extra defensive lineman, but or offensive lineman, either way. But that I don't at this point I don't believe that's going to happen. Just and remember, here's how I do this. I'm talking to people within the organization and trying to get a feel. The roster's not set. Okay. So I don't want you to feel like I'm presenting this to you definitively because I'm not doing that. By the way, this is Hondo Carpenter. Welcome to Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. If I didn't welcome you, terrible host. Thanks for joining me. But it is the feel in the building. You know, what people feel is going on. Next, so again, they took six their first year, Josh and Dave, and I think that they will probably take five this year. Next, we come to wide receiver, where they took five their first year, and I think they're going to keep six this year. And that, of course, Trey Tucker, Devontae, Jacoby Myers, DeAndre Carter, Hunter Renfrow, and Philip Dorsett. So I think that they end up keeping six wide receivers here. It's that deep. It's that talented. Now, maybe they keep six and then say, okay, but who back here is going to be doing some special teams? And then it allows them to get rid of a running back. I think that's certainly, although not probable, I think it's certainly something that's being kicked around inside the building. But I think they end up keeping six. Now, let's talk about specialists. Because obviously I think they've got great specialists. Daniel Carlson, AJ Cole. Arguably, like I think there's no argument Devontae's the best wide receiver. I think they're arguably the best in the NFL, and Bobby Moore is very, very good. So they're set with their three specialists. Now they kept three specialists last year, and I think they keep three this year. Okay, let's keep moving along. Because we got to get to the interesting stuff now. We come to tight ends. Last year they kept three. I think they keep three this year, and I want to go into it. Michael Mayer is in. Austin Hooper, despite what I thought was not a good game at all against the Rams, he has done a lot of good things at camp. We know who he is. He's solid. I don't think he's going to lose a job. Am I 100% convinced of that? No. But I'm 90%. So there you go. And then I think the ball battle comes down to either a Cole Fotheringham or a Jesper Horsted. Now, they like them both. So I would expect whichever one doesn't make the team to get on the practice squad. But they both have played good enough. Remember, they have to get cut before they can get signed to the practice squad. So does another team come along and say, no, 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 no. Don't sign with the Raiders. We want you. I think they're both that good that I think that there's a chance of that. 40%. But I think that battle comes down to Fotheringham or Horsted. Now, if Fotheringham and Horsted just kill it this next week, I mean, kill it. Is there a chance that maybe they go away from an Austin Hooper? Again, yes, chance. But it's going to be a battle now. There's a lot going on inside Raider Nation right now at that position. Now let's go to offensive line because their first year here, they kept 8 guys. And so here's who I have them keeping. Colton, Jermaine, Andre, McClendon, Van Roten, Parham, Munford. Okay, I'm going to read that again. Colton, Jermaine, Andre, McClendon, Van Roten, Dylan, Thayer. Okay, there's 7. So then the battle is, do they keep Alex Bars or Dalton Wagner? Or a Dalton Wagner and let a McClendon Curtis go? I still think McClendon makes his team. It's going to be super close. There's the battle. Now, if they didn't keep 5 running backs, then they could keep a 9th offensive lineman. It's going to be interesting. These are some really tough questions. And I'm going to tell you, to a lot of people's credit, I mean, Dave Ziegler, he and his staff did such a tremendous job assembling a roster with so much talent. There's good players. When you look at wide receivers, somebody going to get cut if they don't keep 6. Who's going to be on a 53-man? Offensive line. Okay, if you don't keep 9, you're going to cut somebody. Who? That's the big question. My first projection, I didn't have Dalton Wagner making the 53 because I thought Brandon Parker would be healthy. Well, he's not. Now he's clearly right up there in that battle. This is a big battle spot at these looking for these 53 men. Then you go and you move to defensive end. Now they kept 10 defensive linemen their first year. And I think they're going to keep 4 defensive ends, Tyree, Max, Chandler, and Kuntz. Man, you're going to let a Jordan Willis go, who's played really well. That's the guy right there. He's going to play somewhere because he's a good player. Fascinating to me. So that's 4. And then if you go over and look at defensive tackle, excuse me here while I look for it. And you go over here and look at defensive tackle, here's who I have them keeping there. I have them keeping 6 of those. So I think like the first year, they keep 10. I think they would have liked to have kept 11 or 12. But you got to look at every position. So here's who I have them keeping defensive tackle. Byron Young, Neil Farrell, Bilal, Jerry Tillery, Matthew Butler, John Jenkins. Okay, so let's think about that. That means that you're not going to have a Jade make the team, which I'm sorry. somewhere in this mix. I just expect, and remember, this is right now. I just expect Jade to come out and play this week, or Nesta Jade. He's one of those guys that I just think, man, I don't know that they'll be able to cut him and then sign him back to the practice squad. It's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out. But 53, they guess what? When Dave Ziegler on the 29th sits there and gets ready to send his roster into the NFL, he doesn't get to say, so I had to make tough decisions here. So I think Byron Young, Neil Farrell, Bilal, Jerry Tillery, Matthew Butler, and John Jenkins. Now, let's assume there are injuries or guys who are nicked up. So maybe you start them off on one of the lists. Then maybe it allows a Jade to make the roster. Or maybe you're out to, you can go find a way to keep an extra offensive lineman somewhere. You know a guy's going to come back, but we can keep this guy and deal with it down the road. Those are big things there. So again, they had 10 their first year, and I think that they carry 10 again this year. Now, let's go to linebacker. The Raiders' first year, they kept 5 linebackers. I have them keeping 5 as well. I have them keeping Luke Masterson. Clearly, he's on the team. Divine Diablo, he's on the team. Robert Spillane, he's their best linebacker. He's a stud. And then I got so I got Bolton. Oh, I got Amari Burney making the team. And then here comes the battle for the 5th spot. I had Drake Thomas making the roster when I did my first one as a UDFA. I think he's in a battle right now with Curtis Bolton. You know, Curtis is the kid out of Oklahoma, and I think he's in his 3rd year. This battle is going to strictly come down to special teams and blue sky. And what I mean by blue sky is potential. I think those two are in a battle. I would not be shocked if Drake makes the team. I think he's played really well. He's just undersized, and that's a concern. But then you got Blake reminds me a lot of a kid, and I don't remember what school he was from, but his name was Jordan Dizon. This is a kid, I think he was picked 2nd round, 3rd round by the Lions, tackling machine, super physical. He just wasn't big guy. And invariably, you see this at certain positions. You see every once in a while, you'll see a unicorn, a guy who doesn't have the size and just plays super well for a long time. But most of the time, those guys that don't have the size, they struggle with the physicality. So I think that gives Bolton a little bit of an edge. But I'm going to tell you right now, either one of those linebackers making the team, I'd not be shocked. Would not be shocked. So again, I had them taking 5 linebackers. They took 5 their first year. Corners, their first year, they took 6. This year, I've got them taking 6. And here are the 6 corners I say the Raiders keep. Jacorian Bennett, Marcus Peters, Duke Shelley, David Long, Nate Hobbs, Amik Robertson. Again, totally, I'm going to read it one more time. Jacorian, Peters, Shelley, Long, Hobbs, Robertson. Interesting group right there. Interesting group. Super young. Super young. Gonna have some young guy mistakes. This is why some of this youth is why, even if Jimmy stays healthy all 17 games, I don't see I see the Raiders winning 9, maybe steal 1, get to 10. But they're just, that youth has got to grow up. I love the saying, and I learned this from coaches: pups got to become dogs. So there's a lot of dogs on this roster, but there's a lot of pups too, and just got to learn from that. Next, let's talk about safeties. I have the Raiders keeping 4. They kept 4 their first year. I have them keeping Trayvon Moehrig, Chris Smith, Marcus Epps, and Roderick Teamer. Those are the 4 guys I expect to make the roster here. Then I've already discussed defensive tackle with you. Again, though, I'm not giving up on a Nesta Jade Silvera. Not doing it. I don't think the Raiders can cut him and get him back to the practice squad. I think somebody is going to be thin enough to let that young pup become a dog. And he makes plays and he's just there. He's on film. And man, that one's a interesting one for me. So that's my projected 53-man roster. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things because you may see some guys who don't play this week, and somebody's going to think, oh, they made the roster. And nah, they just don't want a lot of film out there in case they cut them. They're going to be able to sign them back to their practice squad. Nobody's going to try to take them. I can only think of one or two guys, but I'm just throwing that out there. I don't expect, as this roster comes together, you may remember in the past, I've told you I don't think the roster's done. From the day they make the final cuts to the first week of the first game, there's usually a lot of roster movement because you never know who's going to get cut from another team. You never know, what player is going to become available. What if somebody gets injured in the last week and you got a chance to trade a guy? You never know. So what I would say to you is this. I think this more than last year, this roster's solid. I see a couple places where they could possibly upgrade, and it's possibly. I think this roster, when Dave Ziegler announces this 53-man, it's going to be as close to done, much closer than last year's was. Again, a couple of places maybe if somebody were to get cut, unexpectedly a high performer. But this roster, I think that they love the youth. I think they love it. I think they really love the way this roster has developed. I think if they could put Nesta Jade Silvera on a protected practice squad, they would love for him to still be able to practice and develop because there's a dog in there. Yep. Right now he's a pup, but there's a dog in there. That guy can play football and he can play at the NFL level. A Christian Wilkerson is a guy. I don't think there's any threat that he makes the roster, but I think that's certainly a guy they'd like to keep around. And others, there's others. If they keep Bolton, I know they want to keep Drake around. If they keep Drake, I know they'd like to keep Bolton around. If the battle comes down to Bars or Wagner, I know that they're two different positions. So please don't hear me saying that I think they're not. But I think they'd like to keep either one of those guys around. If they let somebody else go, all right, let's say that they were to cut an Amir or a Bolden, and I don't think they are. But let's say they said, listen, we're going to roll the dice and go with 4 running backs instead of 5 to keep an extra lineman, which would make sense to me. Both of those guys would get picked up. And I wasn't even considering them practice squad guys anyways. But I'm saying this is the thing about this roster that I hope you're getting as a Raider fan is that this is a roster now. There are a lot of good players that if they get cut, other teams are going to gobble up. The Sharks are swimming around the Raiders right now. There's blood in the water. They know there's going to be some good players cut. What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? So it's going to be very fascinating to me to watch how this all develops. So I would really encourage you as you're watching. Now, there are going to be some guys that are on bubbles competing, but this coming week, I don't expect hardly anybody to make the trip to Dallas. I don't expect Hoyer to make the trip. I don't expect Jimmy to make the trip. I don't expect anyone to make a trip. Now, again, for everybody asking me, and I'm getting a lot of this, what do you think the story is with Josh? I'd expect Josh to be there on the roster for the first game of the year. I've told you that since the season ended, and nothing has changed my mind. I expect him there. Now, can you expect him to be 100%? No. Please hear me out. He is not sitting at home eating bonbons, smoking Pall Malls. That's not what he's doing. He is out there. He's working hard. Everything I have heard, he's in tremendous shape. But that's Josh. That's Josh Jacobs. Excuse me. That's just who he is. He's a hardworking guy. He's a good person, good heart. He's going to be ready. But being ready physically, you've heard the term game shape. Anybody can be in shape, but are you in game shape? Now, someone asked me once, how do you explain that? A couple of things. I remember talking to Lorenzo White, who, if many of you know, Lorenzo's a good buddy of mine. If you know Lorenzo White, he almost won a Heisman Trophy, went on and had a long NFL career. Great running back, terrific man. And he and I were talking about that. And he talked about, you get some hits in, get a couple of bruises. And after you get a couple of bruises, your body kind of adjusts. Okay, I'm gonna hurt, but I'm not injured. Just getting that up a little bit. Do I think Josh could show up week 1 and go up and have a great game in Denver? I do. And I expect that he'll have a good game in Denver. I don't know that he would have had it. So do I think he signs this week? 20%. Do I think he signs? If he doesn't, I expect him to be in there, but at 80% there. But I again, now, if I hear different information, this isn't Hondo's opinion. If I hear different information, I will change what I feel. But right now, 20% before the 4th. But at some point, and I think it would be wise of him, because I do believe he's going to play, is just say, all right, let's get in there and go. So, maybe 30% this week, but we'll see. So then that week after the game until the 4th, 30%, and then 40% on Monday the 4th or after. But I fully expect him in here. I'm hearing nothing different. There's no expectations of different. And I'm not giving you opinion. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. And I'm basing it upon that because it's people who are in the know. And so I'm going with that. Interesting roster. And I'm going to be talking about this later, but I've got a podcast coming talking about the Raiders, expectations, what does building a successful franchise look like. We're going to get into all the nuts and bolts and just really talk about analytically some things that the Raiders have done. Also, don't forget, between the end of the regular season and the end of the preseason and the start of the regular, when I say the start, I'm literally referring to the 4th, Monday the 4th. I am going to have 2 really important articles. One of them is going to be introducing you to Josh McDaniel's secret weapon, and the other is going to be how the 2023 Las Vegas Raiders were built. When did this come about? Now, clearly we know they started scouting this class when they got here. Not talking about that. But there were certain things that happened that built this team the way they built, the way Dave Ziegler built this team the way he did. We're going to get into all of those discussions and plenty more. Got a great articles coming up this week. Make sure you're reading all of our articles. Great coverage coming up for you. We appreciate you. Remember, I'm Hondo Carpenter from Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast, part of the Fans First Sports Network. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you again real soon.